Hello everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. We are already in chapter 6 of the sociology book that we are used. The Sociology of Education, a Systematic Analysis. With me, Fitryanisa, we will discuss about the schools as an organization. Contents of this chapter. There are 7 major topics covered in this chapter. The social system of the school, goals of the school system, the school as an organization, centralized versus decentralized decision-making, the fight over control of school, reform of school organization, charter schools, and supports for school improvement. The social system of the school. According to the functional approach, the school system is composed of many distinct subsystems or parts. Each with goals, together these parts make up a functional whole. If one of these parts experiences problem or breakdown or does not carry out its functions, other interdependent parts are affected. Each part is dependent on the others for smooth operation. For the materials or researchers, it needs to be function, and even for its existence. The following is a picture of school which you are familiar, like school guards, classrooms, and support staff and service. As we enter the school, we are greeted by a school guard, often called by school research officer, and may be required to show an ID and sign into logbook of visitors. We are then directed to the office, right? Yeah, you're a member of the school staff. Usually we call it secretary, greets us and sometimes of our business. The office and its staffs acting as buffers to protect the rest of the school from interruption in routine. And then second, classrooms. Classrooms take up most of the physical structure of the school. Within the classroom, teacher and students are the main occupants. However, the order of the classroom, including seating arrangement, work groups, location, style of leadership, class size, and the types of students affect the relationships between position holder and the consequent roles they play. This in turn affect the activities taking place within the classroom. Each classroom has a distinct social climate and structure, largely shaped by teachers' personality and pedagogy, and student characteristics, of course. And support service. Support service are necessary for classroom to function. Standard service include food, janitorial, and emergency health service. In addition, most schools have personnel and facilities for counseling and technology, of course, with special service like psychological testing or tutoring, food service, and library service. This total school system exists in a larger societal context, including the local community with its social classes, minority group compositions, and interest groups, the regional setting, the state government with the Board of Education, legislative bodies, rules, and regulation. A school system like people, buildings, classroom, textbooks, and equipment counts what is its interaction with the environment. Goals of the school system. School goals serve multiple purposes in helping define the system's activities. Goals are not the product of the isolated educational system, but reflect the concerns of the larger society, the community, the participants in the schools, and individuals. The functionalist approach sees each society as having certain goals for its educational system that ideally are put into practice at its school and classrooms. Important schools functions are to socialize the young to perform mid-adult roles, keep the young occupied and delay their entry into a competitive job market, help perpetuate society by socializing the young into particular social values, traditions, and beliefs, develop skills needed to live in society, such as reading, writing, and civic responsibility, and select and educate the young people to meet roles from professionals. Sociologists have viewed schools as bureaucracies, but they point out that the limitation of this bureaucratic model for educational organizations. What works in formal bureaucracies such as business organization may be dysfunctional in schools. The school is in bureaucracy. Yeah, bureaucracy. How often do we throw our hands in that case? At the rhetorical forms and personal attitudes and coldness of bureaucracies? How infuriating it is to be treated as a number. Behind the stereotypical face of bureaucracy are millions of individuals with stories and feelings and experiences like ours. What is it that makes us bristle at the idea of bureaucracy? Bureaucracy is a rational, efficient way of completing tasks and rewarding individuals based on their contributions to the work that needs to be done. However, it can be also an impersonal, inefficient, cumbersome organization unresponsive to human needs, as perhaps you have experienced when you waited in line to accomplish some tasks such as paying for purchase, registering for classes, or renewing a driver license. Yeah, it is bureaucracy. Although we may complain, bureaucracy serves a vital function in our society. A system based on nepotism and favoritism rather than selection and promotion based on merit, for example, would be certain to oversight cries of unfairness and discrimination, yeah, and it would be dysfunctional for most societies. By dividing organization into formal and informal parts, we can better understand the working bureaucracy and the way it relates to the school. Characteristics of bureaucracy. Max Weber, whose ideas were discussed the elements that make up a bureaucratic organization in his typology of characteristics called an ideal type. No real organization is going to match this ideal type characteristics completely, but it gives a set of characteristics against which to compare real organizations. But the characteristics he outlined have some possess a legitimacy that makes it hard for organization to not conform, at least outwardly, to these ways of operating. At the same time, we cannot lose track of the fact that human beings occupy the positions with bureaucratic organizations, not robots. Humans are not merely actors stringly following a fixed script, but shape the script itself through their interactions with others in organizations. The following is six statements are Weber's characteristics. Okay, one is an increasingly fine division of labor at both the administrative and teaching levels, together with a concern for allocating personnel to those positions for which they are best suited, and formalization of recruitment, promotion, and fire policies. Second is the development of an administrative hierarchy incorporating a specific chain of authority and signed channels of communication. Third is the gradual accumulation of specific regulation and rules of procedure that cover everything from counseling and guidance to the school-wide or system-wide testing programs and requirements concerning topics to be covered in many subjects such as history, civics, and social studies. Fourth, uh, the emphasis of personal relationship between students and teachers, and between teachers and administrators, and consequent reorientation toward more formalized and effectively neutral relationship. Fifth, an emphasis on the rationality of the total organization and the processes going on within the organization. In general, the movement, particularly at the secondary school level, has been in the direction of the regional bureaucratic organization that is type of by most government agencies and many business and industrial firms. And the last, in addition to these characteristics discussed by Gosden is Weber's point that the position individuals hold in the organization belong to the organization. Thus, when an administrator, a teacher, or a student leaves the system, new individuals will move in to hold those positions. Decentralized. Centralization of decision making. The degree of which decision making is centralized within an organization varies with the size of the system. The loosely or tightly covered status of the system, the degree of homogeneity of the people involved in the system, and people's goals for the system, whether it be at the international, national, state, or local or organizational level. Powerful countries and international organizations influence policies and programs of less developed countries. For instance, the World Bank makes monetary policy, but it also helps guide and create knowledge, which leads to the production of knowledge. Consider the impact foreign assistance has had on African educational system. Education is essential for development, yet many African countries are unable to afford educational system beyond elementary levels. Therefore, dependence on funds from foreign sources is necessary. The price is often centralization of curriculum, control, and decision making at the international level, and readers level readers local imagination and initiative in how to best educate the country's citizens or like that. For example, the U.S. federal government has garnered increased country education in recent years by determining areas of national concern, requiring schools to respond to initiatives and allocating federal funds for education in those areas. When federal funds are provided for new programs, new administrators are hired to take on program responsibilities. This increases local educational bureaucracy and administrative expenditures, but without necessarily integrating the administrative unit into the education system. This phenomenon is of increased government-allocated funds for accelerated science and math program in the Sputnik era of the 1950s, when the U.S. government was concerned that the former Soviet Union was gaining a technological lead in the space program. More recently, some schools were designed as STEM schools, and given funds were that built. In 1990s, laws were passed requiring that all disabled children have access to education. Accountability has been a term most recently. Centralized power and decision making in education, however, are not necessarily representative of the interests and concern of the local community, resulting in conflict over cost and potential fragmentation. decentralization of decision making. Decentralized school management as opposed to central administrative decision making is a growing trend in the United States, especially as small schools and charters proliferate. Decentralization is often referred to as site-based management, like delegating authority to the school site instead of the central office. A shared decision-making model engaging various stakeholders and facilitative rather than selective leadership. Popular in discussions of educational reforms, the idea involves shifting the initiative in public education from school boards, superintendents, and central administrative office to individual schools. This gives local schools more responsibility for school operations. While many decision makers laud decentralizations, other points on problems such as lack of clear parameters and standards for operation, lack of training for being autonomous, lack of central administrative control over accountability standards, and power issues that hamper decision making. Some view decentralization simply as an administrative device, as a shift in administration from national to the state or city government, or from central city administrative officer to the local schools. Others think that decentralization should embody a design for a meaningful shift in power from central administration to local community schools, and that plans should go beyond education to other crucial areas such as counseling and health for students and even families. For example, in San Francisco, developed a plan to decentralize through school choice, allowing parents to choose their children's public schools. The money follows students, but schools left the harder to educate students, such as those with a few English skills or special education needs get more funds per student. With site-based budgeting, each school decides where to put its funds. This plan has resulted in many schools in performing arts, language, and much and technology. Similar programs have been developed in Cincinnati, Houston, uh, around the United States, and other cities are developing such programs. Research findings indicate that decentralized school plans reduce fraud or corrupt. Non-responsive bureaucracy provide more money at the classroom level and result in higher achievement. Although the power struggles over control of decision making in public school continue, some parents are expressing their concern about the direction of schools by withdrawing their children altogether and placing them in private schools or homeschooling them. Some proposals for alternative structure in education have been realized in the form of alternative and free schools. Parents and students' input into decision-making involved rapid growth, but with their rapid growth have come many questions, court cases, and some failures. Educational crises such as evening have recommended total restructuring or reschooling of education as we know it today in order to change the locus of power. One thing is clear, the issues the full locus of control fires are still hot. The issues of school content concerns more than just the control of education or minority groups. It reflects issues of control over life change. Reform of school organization. Small schools and classrooms, are they better for student achievement? Research has shown that smaller schools, especially small high schools with under 500 students, contribute to students' persistence and engagement with education. students in these schools are more likely to graduate, but smaller size school alone does not necessarily lead to improved academic achievement. The effectiveness of small classroom size under 17 students versus medium 17 until 25 and large over 25 is also the subject of research. The policy disagreements like that. Some argue that the evidence clearly supports the benefits of small size for learning and achievement. Others using the same evidence argue that class size alone does not result in higher student achievement, but that other reforms in such areas as teachers' education are needed to see benefits. Early studies of small classes and schools were the experiments and field studies of individual or small groups or schools. Large-scale surveys has also been used to gather data, and large-scale experiments in states including Tennessee, Indiana, Wisconsin, and California have provided extensive data. For example, California Partnership Academies with over uh, uh, two 290 programs for 10 to 12 grades provide small learning communities and partnerships with business for students. This integrates academic and career technical education. Some conclusion using information from all these studies are as following. One carefully planned and adequately funded small class program generally fewer than 20 students in early grades generated substantial change. And second, the longer students are in small classes, the greater the gains. And third, gains occur in both testing and other indicators of student success. Fourth, gains are returned to upper levels of schooling. And the last can occur for all students, but are greatest for disadvantaged students who carry more gains to upper grades. The explanation for this finding focuses on the greater possible interaction of teacher with individual students. This allows students to better understand classroom rules and culture that carry over into further classrooms. Learning the school culture is crucial in the early grades. Hence, the strong findings for positive of small classes for lower graders. The following are 5 aspects of school that support life in classroom and successful student achievement as gleaned from research. First, coherent instructional guidance system. It's been helpful for teachers in the form of instructional guidance in teaching. Give feedback mechanism to help assess effectiveness of teaching, and materials, tools, and instructional routines shared by faculty to support that efforts. Second, professional capacity. The quality of teachers' professional development to support them, and teachers working together to improve interaction. This involves performance feedback and cooperation to solve problems. Third, strong parent community school ties. Student motivation and participation reflect the strength of the parent and community ties with schools. Fourth, student-centered learning climate. Teachers, administrators, and staff in schools influence the learning climate in the schools and set the tone for the student to see themselves as learners. A safe environment is basic to learning, as belief in students' ability and support for each student's need. And last, leadership drives change. Principals in successful improving schools serve as dynamic leaders. They involve the local community and hire and develop effective staff. The organizational structure of school has a major impact on their success. Other important influence on school success include the status and roles in schools and how they are carried out, which is the topic of our next chapter, okay? And it is last for this section. This is the end of our meeting today. See you again in the next chapter in other presenter. Please like and subscribe our channel YouTube. Thank you. See you again.